Ford Motor Company is more than just a car manufacturer. It's a living piece of American history, woven into the fabric of the nation itself. From its earliest days, Ford has represented the spirit of innovation, resilience, and progress that helped shape the United States into a global powerhouse. It's a symbol of American industry and pride, a beacon for generations of workers and dreamers who saw in Ford the promise of a better life. The company's story is inseparable from the story of America itself. For over a century, the Blue Oval has stood for innovation and the American dream, from the Model T, which put the world on wheels and made cars accessible to ordinary families, to the Mustang, a symbol of freedom and adventure, and the F-150, the best-selling truck in America, trusted by millions for work and family alike. Ford's factories have anchored communities, providing stable jobs and opportunities for generations of American families. These plants have fueled local economies across the country, supporting not just workers, but also the small businesses and neighborhoods that depend on their success. The company's health has long been a barometer for the U.S. economy, reflecting the nation's strengths and vulnerabilities in times of boom and bust. When Ford thrives, so does America. Its success ripples outward, lifting up entire communities and inspiring hope for the future. But in early 2025, Ford faced one of its greatest crises, not from poor quality or lack of innovation, but from a sudden and dramatic shift in national policy that no one saw coming. New protectionist trade measures meant to shield American industry from foreign competition instead put Ford in peril, threatening the very jobs and communities they were supposed to protect. The company's struggle became a national story, dominating headlines and sparking heated debates about the unintended consequences of economic policy and the delicate balance between protection and progress. As Ford grappled with soaring costs, disrupted supply chains, and plummeting profits, the uncertainty spread far beyond the factory floor, touching families and businesses across the nation. Its fate became a symbol of America's industrial future, a test of whether the country could adapt to new challenges without sacrificing its most cherished institutions. If a giant like Ford could be brought to its knees, what did that mean for the rest of us? The answer would shape not just the future of one company, but the destiny of a nation built on the promise of opportunity and resilience. The crisis began with tariffs, taxes on imported goods meant to protect American jobs. For decades, these taxes had been used sparingly, but in 2025, everything changed. The world watched as the United States took a bold, controversial step that would ripple through every corner of the global economy. On March 4, 2025, President Trump announced sweeping 25% tariffs on nearly all imports from Canada and Mexico, and raised tariffs on Chinese goods to 20%. The announcement stunned both allies and rivals, sending shockwaves through boardrooms and government offices worldwide. Overnight, the rules of international trade were rewritten, and uncertainty gripped the markets. The move was intended to protect U.S. manufacturing, but it sent shockwaves through the global economy. Stock markets tumbled as investors scrambled to assess the fallout. Companies that relied on cross-border supply chains suddenly faced a new reality, one where costs could spiral out of control. Automakers especially had built their business models on seamless North American trade. For years, car companies had optimized efficiency by moving parts and vehicles across borders without friction, creating a tightly woven network of suppliers and factories. A single car part might cross borders multiple times before final assembly. This intricate dance of logistics kept costs low and production lines moving, but it also made the industry vulnerable to sudden policy changes. The new tariffs threatened to tax components repeatedly, sending production costs soaring overnight. Executives scrambled to recalculate budgets while managers worried about layoffs and plant closures. The uncertainty was palpable, and the pressure on the industry was immediate. The Dow Jones plunged, economists warned of higher prices and slower growth, and the auto industry faced an existential threat. Consumers braced for more expensive cars, while dealerships wondered how they would move inventory in a suddenly volatile market. For Ford and its rivals, the foundation of how cars were built and sold in America was suddenly at risk. Decades of planning and investment were thrown into question, and workers feared for their livelihoods. The policy designed to protect American industry now threatened to unravel it, leaving communities and families across the country facing an uncertain future. For Ford, the impact of new tariffs was immediate and severe, sending shockwaves through every level of the company. What had once been a well-oiled machine, running on global supply chains and just-in-time deliveries, suddenly ground to a halt as costs began to spiral out of control. With 25% tariffs slapped on vehicles and parts imported from Mexico, Ford's manufacturing costs exploded overnight, projected to add a staggering $2.50 billion to the company's expenses in 2025 alone. Every car rolling off the line became significantly more expensive to build, squeezing already thin profit margins. Tariffs on Chinese components made things even worse, hitting thousands of essential parts that Ford relied on for everything from electronics to engine assemblies. The company found itself scrambling to source alternatives, but global supply chains don't shift overnight. As a result, Ford's net income plummeted, earnings per share collapsed, and the company was forced to suspend its financial guidance, leaving investors and employees alike in the dark about the future. Leadership scrambled for solutions, rerouting vehicles, suspending exports, and holding emergency meetings to try to stem the bleeding. But these were only temporary fixes, unable to address the root of the problem. The integrated North American supply chain, once Ford's greatest strength, had suddenly become a major liability. Decades of cross-border cooperation and efficiency were now obstacles in a new era of protectionism. Ford faced a stark choice: move production back to the US at enormous cost, risking even more disruption, or keep bleeding money as tariffs ate away at the bottom line. Neither option offered a clear path forward. Building new factories in the US would take years and require billions in investment, with no guarantee that future policies wouldn't change again. The uncertainty made long-term planning nearly impossible. Meanwhile, Ford's stock price continued to fall, and its long-term plans were thrown into chaos. The company's entire strategy was upended, all because of a policy that was supposed to help American industry. In the end, Ford was left fighting for survival, caught in the crossfire of a global trade war it never wanted. The tariff crisis hit, as Ford was already struggling with its costly transition to electric vehicles. Billions invested in the Model E division had yet to pay off. Losses were mounting. Even before tariffs, Ford expected a $5.5 billion loss in its EV division for 2025. The profitable Ford Blue division, which funded the EV push, was now under siege from tariffs. Ford was forced to cancel future projects, including its next-generation EV platform, sacrificing innovation for survival. The company was caught between a money-losing electric future and a tariff-battered present. The delicate balance between old and new was shattered. Without profits from gasoline vehicles, Ford's electric ambitions were in jeopardy. The company faced a perfect storm, with no clear path forward. Ford wasn't alone. GM and Stellantis were also hit hard. All three had built complex cross-border supply chains, now disrupted by tariffs. GM slashed its profit forecast, warning of up to $5 billion in new costs. Stellantis suspended its financial guidance, citing extreme uncertainty. Even though Ford assembled more vehicles in the US than its rivals, hidden tariff costs still piled up. The crisis showed that no automaker was immune in a globalized industry. The very policies meant to protect American manufacturing now threatened to bankrupt its icons. America's trading partners didn't sit idly by. Canada, Mexico, and China retaliated with tariffs of their own, targeting US goods and deepening the crisis. Canada imposed a 25% tariff on $107 billion of US products, hitting everything from agriculture to manufacturing. Mexico followed suit, and Ford now faced higher costs both importing and exporting across North America. The integrated manufacturing ecosystem was thrown into chaos. China, already in a trade dispute with the US, imposed new tariffs on American exports, especially cars and agriculture. Ford lost access to the world's largest car market almost overnight. The trade war turned a domestic policy problem into a global nightmare. US companies found themselves isolated with fewer markets and higher costs. The backlash made a bad situation even worse. The financial crisis at Ford quickly hit American workers and their families. The auto industry supports hundreds of thousands of jobs. As profits fell, layoffs and plant shutdowns loomed. The very workers' tariffs were meant to protect now faced job insecurity. The pain was shared across borders. Shutdowns in Canada threatened US jobs, and vice versa. Generations of families who relied on stable auto jobs now faced an uncertain future. Anxiety spread through auto towns in the Midwest. Ford's falling stock price hurt retirement savings and 401 KIs for employees and retirees. The company's instability raised fears about its ability to meet pension obligations. The human cost of the trade war was real and deeply personal. For many, the American dream built on the auto industry was suddenly at risk. The tariffs' impact rippled far beyond automakers. Consumers faced higher prices. Analysts predicted new cars could cost thousands more. Some rushed to buy before prices rose, but this was only a temporary fix. As costs climbed, auto sales slowed, hurting revenues and threatening more jobs. Supply chains were thrown into chaos. A single delayed part could halt an entire assembly line. Repair costs rose as imported parts became more expensive. The pain spread to other industries: steel, aluminum, even agriculture. Retaliatory tariffs hurt American farmers, and the cost of living climbed for everyone. The trade war was a nationwide economic shock, not a targeted policy. Ford's crisis in 2025 is a stark warning about the dangers of protectionism in a global economy. The company's near collapse showed how even giants can be undone by sudden policy shifts. Tariffs meant to protect American industry instead triggered retaliation, closed markets, and hurt workers. The experience proved that economic health depends on cooperation, not isolation. Ford's recovery, and America's, depends on smarter, more strategic engagement with the world. The crisis set back Ford's electric transition and may have handed an advantage to competitors. The lesson is clear: policies based on slogans can have devastating, unintended consequences. America's future prosperity depends on learning from this crisis and choosing a path of thoughtful global engagement.